Our next speaker is Dr. Livia Boriniga. She's in the University of St. Thomas Communications Department, where she speaks or she lectures on public speaking, persuasion, and argumentation. So she should be able to communicate pretty effectively today, I would imagine. Dr. Bornigia.
So servant leadership, as we've heard up to this point, is multifaceted and it's complex. It's complex not only in the way one defines it, I think it's much more complex in the way one applies it to everyday life. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is to share with you how some of the concepts of servant leaderships that have been highlighted today or have not yet been highlighted have been most relevant in my personal and professional life, both as the recipient. I was very lucky to be taught by many great servant leaders, and also for the way that I try to implement them every day in my life. So I know, I hope, I think, that everyone in this room has had that one special person who has helped them in significant moments in our lives. I'm looking at these wonderful students here, and I know that that is true. That person who has pushed us along, who has motivated and inspired us, who has let us have it, when we needed a dose of tough love. That someone, in one word, who has mentored us into becoming the people that we are here today in this room. If you're lucky, you've had more than one. And I have to confess that I have been very, very lucky in my life. A couple of quick examples. When I was in graduate school, a wonderful teacher and human being, my dear, dear friend, the late Dr. Ken Short, he was a professor in the University of Houston Graduate School of Communication. He opened my eyes to show me that I could be so much more than what I thought. He empowered me to seek a terminal degree in my field because he could see something in me that I could not yet see. So he didn't bully me into getting this degree. He did what mentors do. He simply turned my head gently in that direction, and then he worked me so hard. It is so true what they say, that by the end of your work on a dissertation, you have this love-hate relationship with the work and with your mentor. But he did that for me, and he led me toward academia, a field that I love passionately. And I can honestly say that I owe my professional identity as a researcher, and even more importantly, as a teacher, to him. Fast forward, when I finished my graduate studies, I decided that it was time to pursue another great passion of mine, the stage. So once again, I was incredibly lucky. On my very first audition, in a professional audition, and I promise you I was extremely green and I was extremely nervous, someone saw something in me. He took a chance and offered me a resident position in his company. I was the greenest person there. I worked incredibly hard, and he gave me the tools to improve my skills. He listened to my continuous self-criticisms. He empowered me to discover that I love directing, maybe even more than acting. There's the teacher in me. And he did all this by also sharing of himself. He shared of his struggles, of his own self-criticisms in a style, and I think this is really important for servant leaders, in a style that I've come to define as confident humility. Ultimately, I believe that mentorship is at the essence of servant leadership because of the ways that I've experienced it in my life and because of the ways that I strive to implement it every day. As we know, in his seminal work, I think Larry already mentioned it, on servant leadership, Robert Greenleaf described the servant leader as, and I quote, someone who goes beyond self-interest, someone who is governed by creating opportunities for followers to help them grow, and thus so by holding the trust of those he leads and serves. Thus, you can see that a servant leader is very much a mentor. I spent much of my life thinking about the kind of person that I want to be. And by that, what do I mean? I mean, what kind of footprint do I want to leave behind? What kind of mentorship do I want to offer as a teacher? What kind of mentorship do I want to offer as a director? I believe that this is an essential question for all those of us in this room who strive to be servant leaders. And I think it is a question that has to be revisited frequently and with dispassionate self-criticism. One of my dear friends, and someone many of you know, he may even be here today, Father Nesti, once told me that conversion comes from within. That's how he talked me into teaching classes for his program. It's very difficult to say now to that man. He's a wonderful example of a servant leader. And I think it really is our actions, based on our intentions, that will ultimately inspire or discourage others to, in the words of Nelson Mandela, make manifest the glory of God that is within us all. I must say, I work hard to behave in a way that is consistent with my values and with the footprint that I would like to leave behind. The Greeks called this ethos, or credibility, which to them was a practical and subordinate science based on the question of intentionality. As a human being and as a leader, are your intentions honest? Are your intentions for the common good? Or are your intentions covering a hidden agenda which is dependent on self-interest? Even more than that, is the achievement of the common good even on the radar? Or is it just a side benefit? Is it something which may or may not come to pass once the real intentions of the alleged leader have come to fruition? Intentionality, then, based on ethos, which is based in honesty, is another essential component of servant leadership in my life. Interestingly, more current research supports this notion under the concept of authenticity. According to an article in the Journal of Business Psychology, a servant leader, and I quote, expresses oneself in a way that is consistent with inner thoughts and feelings. Authenticity is about being true to oneself, accurately representing, publicly and privately, internal states, intentions, and commitments. From an organizational perspective, it can be defined as behaving in such a way that professional roles remain secondary to whom the individual is as a person. To whom the individual is as a person. Now, come on, we know that is really hard to apply. And yet, the concept is clear. Should cognitive dissonance occur between the demands of the organization and the personal core beliefs and values, the authentic leader will stay true to who they are, not necessarily by dropping out, but by looking for ways to find solutions, to create harmony, or in other words, to reduce the dissonance between the two. You could also look at this concept as a personal and professional integrity, yeah? And I will give you an example. I was chair, as I think Larry mentioned, we still work on the Social Justice Committee together, but I was chair of the Social Justice Committee at my university for a number of years. Love the Social Justice Committee. In some ways, I think it is the best way to promote faith in action. During this time, students, what I call my baby students in my public speaking class, and then other students as well in upper division courses, but they approached me with a very serious need. They wanted basic health care on campus, like a nurse, to provide basic aids for basic need for emergencies or just anything that may come up. The university had opted to eliminate the nurse on campus and focus instead on health and prevention initiatives. In this case, the choice of the organization, my university, was in direct contrast with my core beliefs about caring for our students in a holistic way, and also to provide what Catholic social justice teachings describe as the stewardship of the body. Therefore, together with other committee members, we chose to serve our students' needs over the needs of the organizations. We continue to do so since the issue has not yet been resolved, although I am hopeful that it will, and I will continue to work on it. It's become my personal crusade. But how do we do this? Again, we do this by looking for effective solutions that will meet the demands of the students while also being mindful and realistic about the needs and demands of the organization. No one said it was going to be easy, right? And this leads me to what I think is the most important component of servant leadership, empathy. Actually, I'm going to take it a step further in my idealistic approach to life and tell you that I believe that empathy is the single most important tool to create harmony and promote peace in this world. And that is because when you can understand another person, it's very difficult to judge them or to be afraid of them. In psychological terms, empathy is explained as interpersonal acceptance. In other words, and I quote, "It is about being able to cognitively adopt the psychological perspective of other people and experience feelings of warmth and compassion. This creates, in turn, an atmosphere of trust, where people feel accepted, are free to make mistakes, very important, and know that they will not be rejected, thus developing high-quality relationships by understanding the behavior and motivations of others." And I will give you another quick example, because this really forms the core of my teaching philosophy. As you can probably imagine, in my public speaking class, especially the first one, the most common universally accepted emotion that students feel at the beginning of the semester is terror. Sometimes we do better, and we can downgrade terror to a simple, paralyzing fear. Yes. So how do I help them? The way I help my students to overcome this fear and to find their own power and unique voice is through empathy. I tell them my story. I remember all too well, even though it was a long time ago, but I still remember what it was like to be 18, new to the United States, new to college life, and to be thrown to the wolves, literally, in a public speaking class on my very first semester as a college student. And the class was in English, not my native tongue. Talk about terror. Yeah? I tell them this, I tell them, if someone would have told me back then, when I was sitting in the class, shaking in my boots, that one day I would learn to love this discipline so much that I would devote my life to teaching it, I would have thought they were stark, raving mad. In that moment, first there is the stunned silence, and then secondly, empathy is created and trust. Because in that moment, I'm willing to share my story with I think, a degree of courage. It always takes courage to show vulnerability. And Maya Angelou once said, I think we all have empathy. We may not all have enough courage to display it, though. And she's right. In that moment, I'm not just teacher, I am student with them. And with a sense of humility about my own struggles, I simply attempt to mentor them toward empowerment by telling them that I understand their fear. By telling them that if I can do it, they can do it too. Through hard work, through accountability, and by not being afraid to make mistakes. Empathy cannot exist without courage, I think, and an inspired servant leader must foster both. The famous educator and author, Sir Ken Robinson, some of you may know him, who is one of my greatest sources of inspiration, stated in a TED Talk on creativity that we have created entire educational systems where students are afraid to make mistakes. Why? because they will get a bad grade, or because the teacher will judge them negatively. What happens at the organizational level? We're afraid to make mistakes because we may encounter the ridicule of our peers, because maybe we won't get that promotion, or in the very worst case scenario, because we might get fired. That is not the way to lead. A servant leader, without the willingness to make mistakes, a servant leader knows that no creative idea would have ever been born. Yeah? Think about it. Where would we be without all of Leonardo da Vinci's failed, yet brilliant attempts at creating a prototype for a flying machine? I had to throw someone from my native country in there. From a different perspective, from an actor's perspective, where would they be without that sacred space that a director can create before a show opens? That sacred space called rehearsal, where mistakes are not only allowed, but they are encouraged, because they provide the creative solutions to understanding the words and the actions of these characters on the page, which are sometimes very difficult to understand. I've had the fortune of working with horrible directors as well, who did not understand this concept, much less anything else about servant leaderships. They would really benefit from being in this room with us this morning. One such director, who shall remain unnamed, here's a hint, during the first few days of rehearsal for a major Houston theater, got in my face, literally, and screamed a racial slur in front of the whole class. Truly for no reason, because that specific time I had not made a mistake. Other times I had, but not at that time. We never recovered. Yes, of course we opened the show, because this is what actors do. We are well-oiled machines that are trained to fight hard to make sure that the show is successful, yeah? But in that moment, that director destroyed that thin, vulnerable membrane of trust that had begun to form between him and his cast. He lost us. A servant leader empowers uniqueness by allowing mistakes. Of course, accountability pervades everything that the servant leader does, and the roles and responsibilities are clearly explained because the servant leader clearly explains them. Ultimately, when all is said and done, when the teaching semester is over, and for me, when the show is up and running, or we can take it a step further and say when the film opens, the true servant leader stands back, meaning that he or she retreats in the background when the task has been successfully accomplished to allow other team members to take credit and share in the joy of the completion of a project. Think about it, when a film or play opens in the dim lights of the theater, audiences, unless you are a film geek like myself, but we don't spend a lot of time thinking about the director, right? We look and we observe the work of the actors, or maybe the plot, or the music, if we are so inclined. And ultimately, that is exactly what the servant leader wants: the success and creation of something new, with a life of its own, through the empowerment of the creativity of all who participated. And I feel that way every time one of my students conquers the terror and gets up and delivers an impassioned, persuasive argument about something that matters for their lives and, very importantly, for the common good, because we are a social justice-inspired department, and we try to include elements of social justice in all that we teach. I'll leave you with this one last thought. Because servant leadership is very much about humility, I know that I am truly far from being perfect. And that I need all the help I can get so that I can continue on this journey. So I seek the advice of all of those who are infinitely wiser than I am, because I try to continue to learn to be a better human being. And I believe that that is the essence of servant leadership. Thank you for your time.